Have you noticed how gaming can feel a bit familiar these days? Now, I'm not just talking about remakes and sequels and their license to print money, or even that live service unicorn that publishers refuse to stop chasing. Here I am referring to brand new IPs, and we have had some absolute bangers in recent years. But even then, these games will usually borrow from known industry standards. Stellar Blade proudly displays its inspiration from both Nier Automata and Sekiro, one obviously more so than the other. Lies of P turned out to be the closest thing we've ever had to a Bloodborne sequel, and it took my wife less than 5 minutes to figure out that Metaphor was made by the Persona people. Now, it's not that these games were bad, on the contrary, I love all three, or even that there's anything wrong with standing on the shoulders of giants, and I would never deny that sequels and remakes and new games alike all do their part for innovation and advancing the industry. What I want to ask is, what has happened to all of the truly original ideas? The fresh, exciting worlds that gaming used to live on? Remember when the original Final Fantasy VII sold so well in the West that Square were allowed to make basically whatever they wanted, and they made an action horror RPG about sentient mitochondria. I mean, who the hell would greenlight an idea like that today? Nobody. Which is a shame, because Parasite Eve was a masterpiece, and fans are still clamouring for a remake nearly 30 years later. It just seems like this sort of creativity never happens anymore. No longer are developers integrating Final Fantasy with chess, or pitting redheads against dinosaurs. It is rare today that we the consumer will purchase a big budget release and be genuinely surprised by everything, or sometimes even anything about it. Whether it's a story you've heard before, or identical gameplay mechanics, or the reviewer saying it's like X, Y, or Z popular game, usually Dark Souls, new ideas are just so few and far between. And so this is what we are going to be talking about today. Just exactly why are original video game IPs so much harder to come by now? The subject of remakes is already well-worn territory for me, so I'll keep this bit brief, though I will of course link my remakes video down in the description. The TLDR is this: a beautifully crafted remake that honours a beloved classic is probably going to be a massive hit. Think Final Fantasy VII, or pretty much any of the Resident Evils at this point. Unfortunately, not always the case, I know. Whilst I think the Dead Space remake was phenomenal, it was launched 1 month after Christmas with a price tag 20% higher than Resi 4. So unfortunately, we are unlikely to ever see a continuation. And despite the spectacular Hollywood level of talent involved, and the overall game being pretty decent to be fair, Alone in the Dark sadly amounted to yet another failed attempt to revive this franchise. Despite these examples, the perception today is that remakes currently carry less risk than a new IP. Developing a brand new IP is a huge risk. Budgets for AAA games now stretch into the hundreds of millions, and publishers want guaranteed returns on their investments. And on the more human side of things, it is heartbreaking to pour so much love into a project only to have it fail. Just ask any YouTuber. And even then, you're at the mercy of release windows and marketing and pricing and other competing games on the release schedule. Just look at what happened to Titanfall 2. Remakes today are an important vehicle for driving forward innovation and progress within the video game industry, and as I covered in detail previously, I do not believe they are the easy way out. But they have also reached the point where they are the gamer's equivalent of comfort food, and as a result, a much safer bet for developers. Now, as much as I would love to place all of the blame squarely at the feet of people that are paid a lot more than you or I, for an argument to be fair, responsibility does have to be apportioned on all sides. Because another big factor in all of this is us, the players. Industry trends are what they are because we set them. In all aspects of life, people naturally gravitate towards certain things, and in this case, I am talking about sequels, remakes, and remasters. In the last few years, we've had some long-awaited and extremely well-received sequels. God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, Tears of the Kingdom. Each one came chugging along on their own respective juggernaut-sized hype trains, and they all absolutely slapped. When a beloved series gets a new installment, we want to be a part of it, and there isn't anything inherently wrong with liking the things that we like. But, as much as I have espoused how nostalgia can be a powerful force for good, it does also carry a risk of stagnating the industry, especially when it misses the mark, seems pretty unnecessary, or in extreme cases, is something that literally nobody wanted. The long and short of it is that people lean towards the familiar, so familiar ideas are more likely to get the green light. Corporate greed. I understand that if there is a market share and you are not getting a piece of the pie, then it's considered a loss. That's Business 101. But eventually, surely, you have to accept when something isn't working. Live service games, or games as a service if you will, have been a drain on everything from budgets to creativity for over a decade now. Even before Concord became one of the biggest flops in the history of anything ever, there were so many cautionary tales out there. At this point, the likes of Anthem or Babylon's Fall are probably scary bedtime stories that marketing execs tell their junior staffers when they miss a target. And yet, publishers are belligerently carrying on with their attempts to break into the live service market, despite the overwhelming number of case studies telling them that they are going to fail. It's a near certainty at this point. Breaking into that market is so ridiculously hard. It is overcrowded, and most new entries burn out and close down in a matter of months. So, why do they do it? Why is it okay to take a risk like this on projects that are almost certain to fail, but not okay to take a risk on a new single-player IP? Corporate greed. A successful live service game can keep players coming back for months, even years. A single human no longer equates to a single sale. They become a potential income stream. Extra content, battle passes, cosmetics. Developers are being forced to concentrate on things like this instead of being allowed to create bold, new, original worlds. As long as this market exists, everybody will unfortunately want a piece of it. We can only hope that Concord becomes a wake-up call, but unfortunately, I doubt it. So if you've been holding off on firing into the comments about indie games, I appreciate that, and I'll address them now. And just for you, I'll link my indie games video in the description too. When it comes to actual new ideas, indie games are a bright spot in an otherwise very dark night. Without the enormous budgets and high stakes synonymous with AAA development, indie studios have a lot more freedom to experiment. And whilst this is all well and good, as long as money exists, this dynamic will never change. So why are we even talking about indie games? Despite the controversy surrounding actual sales figures and the studio unfortunately closing down, Hi-Fi Rush hit 3 million players within 4 months and won multiple awards. The likes of Hollow Knight and Hades have been phenomenal hits, with critics and players alike. It is important to acknowledge indie games here because they are tangible proof that originality can still thrive in today's market. Not every new idea is a winner, of course, but indie games are showing that fresh ideas can still have a place in modern gaming. If you have ever tried to secure funding in a corporate environment, you have likely been met with specific and storied examples of why your idea is wrong. Sometimes studios are given the green light to create something new, but their first and biggest challenge is deciding just how much creative freedom they can afford themselves. Innovation is important to stand out in a crowded market, but straying too far from what players are familiar with can run the risk of alienating your audience. Personally, I think this is where developers and publishers should spend more time playing indie games. They would learn that it is okay to deviate from established mechanics, as long as your game is well made and enjoyable to play. As it stands, the fear of straying too far off course is handcuffing developers, and often leads to lackluster creations. Forspoken looked like it was going to be great. Magical parkour and funky powers and a talking bracelet, I mean, that's always a solid combination. But if your world is bland and nobody likes your protagonist, you're fighting a losing battle. The failure of these games sends a message to developers: originality is risky. And in an industry where profits are king, those risks can quickly become career-ending for developers. So when you take a new idea to the money people, it won't matter that the restrictions they placed on your last new idea led to its downfall. All they will remember is that it did fall down, as well as exactly how much it cost them, and why this is absolute proof that new ideas are bad. Now, to be completely fair to the innovators out there, sometimes they throw caution to the wind, and they actually do give an original idea the execution that it deserves. I turn my attention now to the studio Arcane, responsible for the likes of Dishonored 2, Prey, and Deathloop. All great games, each one an original IP with an original hook, even if Deathloop did feel a little bit like Dishonored with guns. Unfortunately, the issue isn't always the quality of the game, but more the market's reception. Without the brand recognition of a sequel or a suitable level of marketing going viral, many original IPs fail to reach the audience that they deserve. And when an original IP doesn't perform well, the consequences are severe. Developers face layoffs, studios shut down, and publishers become even more hesitant to invest in new ideas. It's a lose-lose scenario that, unfortunately, stifles creativity across the industry. So, what needs to change? Now, I'm just a middle-aged gamer, trying to make a living on the internet. But gosh darn it, I've played a lot of games, and I have some thoughts on the matter. First of all, I want to talk about Elden Ring. On the one hand, yes, it is open world Dark Souls. Obviously, every Souls junkie was going to buy it. But nobody could have ever predicted just how many of the Souls curious were going to be converted. And whilst it is an open world game, well, I'm sure we've all seen the meme of what Elden Ring would look like if Ubisoft had made it. From Software dared to blaze their own trail, and it paid off. Something they have been doing consistently ever since they gave absolute creative freedom to a talented and young developer who birthed a whole new genre, and is coincidentally now president of that same company. And now, I would like to talk about Control. I know that Sam Lake had been tilting at this particular windmill for a while, but my god did he knock it out of the park with Control. Control is not like anything I had ever played. Well, perhaps maybe a little bit like Quantum Break, but at best that game now feels like a tech demo for what Control is. Not only is there now a sequel in the works, but Control helped to get Alan Wake 2 off the ground, and help cement a shared universe between these games. Publishers need to be willing to take risks with creative freedom. Fresh ideas can succeed if they're backed by vision, smart marketing, and the patience to let players discover them. I'd also like to weigh in on increasingly ultra-realistic graphics, because they make a staggering difference to development cost and resource requirements. As long as you have a director with vision and the chops to bring it to life, you don't always need photorealistic graphics. Just look at Metaphor. And honestly, ultra-realism isn't always a guarantee of success. Just look at Hellblade 2. And finally, we as the players have a role to play by supporting innovation where we see it. Whether it's an ambitious AAA release or a bold indie experiment, we can show the industry that there's an appetite for creativity. Now, this isn't a call to support every new idea, because as is the case in all mediums, some of them will be terrible, and I appreciate games are too expensive now to be frivolous about the cost. But once upon a time, Minecraft was a new idea that you had only sort of heard about. So was Fortnite. Hell, so was Dark Souls. But we tried them out, word spread, and the rest, as they say. If you are still watching at this point, thank you so much for supporting my channel like you do. I hope you have enjoyed this video. For those of you who don't know, I will soon be leaving my day job after 15 years, and whilst I look for another job, I will also be taking full advantage of the opportunity to work on my YouTube content full time. And if enough of you guys can help me, then just maybe we can turn my content creation dreams into a full-time reality. I don't use Patreon, but I do use YouTube memberships, and it amounts to the same thing. For just £2 a month, you will get access to a boatload of extras, including bonus videos, behind-the-scenes updates, every channel on my Discord server, acknowledgement in the credits, and you will get access to my new videos 2 days before I release them to the public. And if you would like to lend me that extra level of support, you can join using the link in the description. Now, whilst I have put an ungodly amount of research into this video, these are simply my findings and opinions, and I have never worked in the video game industry. I am very keen to read your inputs on this one, especially if you do have insider industry knowledge. Thank you as always for watching and supporting my channel, you guys. See you on the next one.